What is good? What is good, everybody? Happy Sunday evening to all y'all out there. I am checking in with the evening live stream reaction. Cops and convicts. A little distracted. I'm watching the Cowboys try and make this comeback. Looks like they're going to fall short. Misery loves company. I'm a Jets fan, and they are hot trash. Welcome. Just doing this impromptu. It's been on my mind. Welcome to Cops and Convicts. We are streaming live on Facebook, the Cops and Convicts YouTube channel, and LinkedIn. Subscribe, follow, and hit the notification bells on those platforms. Help our channel grow. I just wanted to check in tonight. Because I've had some things on my mind as it relates to law enforcement, and one particular officer that we met a little while back during a game changer training event in Richmond, Virginia. His name is Officer El Amin, and he got real. Well, he's always real, but he talked about the history of law enforcement and how in their particular department at the time he said it, officers of color had only been allowed to be members of law enforcement within that department, which is the Richmond Police Department, for only 80 years. He talked about how people don't want to talk about the unequal treatment and the history of law enforcement and the toxic environment inside of law enforcement. So I want to go through each little bit of this clip that we posted on our TikTok channel and jump in, make some comments if you want. We're going to be taking this live stream, chopping it up and putting it on to various platforms. So let's check in with Officer El Amin and let me know what you think. Let me do this the other way around. Okay.
Department since 1782.
Let me rewind it a little bit.
Richmond has had a police department since 1782. We didn't have black officers until 80 years ago. So we're talking about 150 years of just only white officers. And then even when black officers became eligible, so to speak, we didn't have all the rights that regular officers had. So here's the thing, nobody wants to cry for the police. And I'm not trying to get people to cry for me, not at all, because I love my job. It's a whole lot of historical things that went on with the police before black people could even become police officers. And that's one reason I'm sure that black folks don't send money to the police.
Now, I want to stop there. He didn't have to say that, but he said that for a reason. And I want to touch on that for a moment. We've talked about money and the revenue that tickets generate in cities and the revenue and all the money that's made inside the prison system. But what he's talking about is support for law enforcement. And I've often said over the years, you could take any city, Los Angeles. And if you put a giant map of the entire city up on your wall with all the different neighborhoods, and you put red push pins into all the homes of residents that donate to law enforcement, whether they contribute to the police foundation or they donate in any way. If you put red push pins in all of those homes, a picture will develop right in front of your eyes. You'll see that all those red push pins are in neighborhoods that are largely white. And they have no problems with law enforcement. They love the police. They support the police. They donate money to police. And if you look at where there are no push pins, by and large, those are going to be areas, neighborhoods that are inhabited by Latino and Black. And when we first started our game changer model, one of my current advisory board members is a former federal law enforcement chief, and he also was a chief in Colorado for a small town. He told me that people get the type of policing that they pay for. And I didn't know what he meant by that. And what he was saying to me is people who contribute to law enforcement and, they support sheriff's campaign, sheriffs run for office. They donate to the Police Athletic League. They donate to various law enforcement foundations. That money gives you a say. It gives you access. It gives you influence, especially in wealthy neighborhoods. The police officers here in Los Angeles talk about how different, I should say, the Beverly Hills Police Department is. So El Amin is saying, he's talking about one of the reasons why Black families do not donate to law enforcement. It's because of the history that Black people have had with law enforcement, not being allowed to be in law enforcement for so long, and then how they've been treated by law enforcement. So I want to point that out to you. Let's get back to the rest of what he was saying.
Because of the way their parents were treated or their grandparents. Because 80 years is not a long time, not for real. When you're talking about 200 some years of straight racism, when you're Black, you can't even work here. So I know that's part of that, but I just wanted to touch on that.
Elamina, I want to keep you on for a second. It's not just Black, it was brown and it was female too.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely, you're right.
So when you say that, Black officers, female officers, officers of color, when they were able to become members of law enforcement, didn't have the same rights as the white officers, can you please elaborate on what you mean by that?
Yeah, like you're not going to be driving a car. You'll just be walking. You can't arrest a white person. I mean, this is how it started. And then women came after that. And they wouldn't allow women to do certain jobs. So then you got to get through that. And I don't even know when that stopped, but trust and believe, racism still exists within the police department.
Okay, so at the time he made those comments, I wasn't aware of some of what we can call Jim Crow environments and rules inside of law enforcement. So it's one thing to not be allowed to be in law enforcement. It's another thing that once you're a member of law enforcement, you don't have the full responsibilities and rights of the white male cops. And that's what he's talking about. So when he said that, I had no idea that when they first started to admit Black officers and officers of color inside of law enforcement, that they were not permitted to drive squad cars. They were not permitted to arrest white people. I mean, it's not hard to believe. But what he's saying is all that has been swept under the rug, and people have they wonder why people of color have a problem with law enforcement. So I wanted to show you that video. But then I wanted to touch on some things that I have heard during game changer trainings that your average citizen is not aware of, and you're not going to hear on Fox, MSNBC, and CNN. You're not going to hear it on the major networks because they don't give officers an opportunity to speak the truth. And Game Changer provides officers with a platform to speak their mind. They know the cameras are rolling. Obviously, he's looking into the camera. That was done via Zoom. And they want to tell you what's going on inside of law enforcement. So I want to touch on some of the Jim Crow things that he was talking about, like not being allowed to drive a squad car, not being allowed to arrest white people. Those were the conditions inside of law enforcement early on when the color barrier was broken or where law enforcement was not segregated anymore. So a couple of years ago, I was sitting in the office of the former National City Police Chief. He's not the current chief now, but he was Latino. And he was talking to me about how difficult it was, how uniquely difficult it was for him to be Latino and work his way up the ranks inside of law enforcement. And he told me about the early days of law enforcement, that one of the Jim Crow laws inside of law enforcement was, okay, we're going to let Black and brown people inside of the profession. But then they instituted a height requirement. You had to be, let's just say, 5'8" and above to be a cop. And he told me that directly affected Latino and Asian police officers, since they tend to be shorter. This is what he said. This is not me talking. I had no idea that was a thing. And I'm 99.9% sure that none of you knew that was a thing. But that's not something that the general public knows about law enforcement at all. Another thing that I discovered during this 8-year journey of conducting Game Changer trainings, and if you're unaware of what Game Changer is, my nonprofit organization brings together community residents, just like you, and members of law enforcement to participate in a focus group where we all discuss problems that exist and then get into small groups and devise solutions to those problems. So I've been doing that for 8 years. We've done 170 trainings, mostly here in Southern California, but because of COVID, we had to use Zoom. And that was a good thing because it allowed us to bring people together in the fashion I just described from all over the country. So you could be in Georgia, you could be in Texas, you could be a law enforcement member from Kalamazoo, Michigan. And we brought people from different states, different law enforcement agencies to discuss problems and devise solutions together. So one of the things that I discovered early on from law enforcement is that there are different police officer associations, different unions. So when I say union, it's very well known inside of the profession that the main law enforcement union is the union that most members of law enforcement belong to and they pay dues to. And from what officers have told me, they pay those dues in the event that they need legal representation. So they get into a use of force situation, they have to defend themselves and use force, use deadly force. They're going to need legal representation in the event that this goes to court. That's what they pay the union dues for. And that union is for all of the police officers, regardless of your gender, regardless of your race. But then I learned from officers that outside of that main, let's call it the mainstream union, that's typically generally comprised of white male board members on the union inside the department. They have police officer association groups that are separated demographically. So you have a female police officer association. You have a Black officer association. You have a Latino officer association. You have an Asian officer association. You have a Pacific Islander office association. I'm not aware of an LGBTQ officer association. I guess that one exists, but I have not heard that. And when I heard that, I was shocked. And I asked a friend of mine who's still currently working with the San Diego Police Department. I asked him, what's that about? And he said, each demographic group that has its own officer association exists because of the unique issues that they experience being a member of law enforcement and also being female, Latino, Asian, Black. It's kind of like a support group. We're Latino officers, and we have these issues inside of this profession that we need to come together and bond and present a united front, address issues that are affecting us, and so on down the line. Female officers have the same thing. And this isn't just on the local level. You can Google this. There is a Black Police Officers Association on a national level. Same with Latino, same with female, same with Asian on the national level. So it's a trip because the truth of the matter is there's segregation inside of law enforcement from a demographic standpoint. Now, the white male officers, they're just part of the Police Officers Association. The mainstream one, the normal one, the one that people donate to. That's the Police Officer Association that John and Jane taxpayer donate to. And this officer that I was telling you about in San Diego, I said, are you actively involved in the mainstream Police Officer Association? And he said, hell no. He said, I wouldn't join that. I said, why? He said, I don't trust them. I'm simply a member of the Black Police Officers Association. And I pay dues in the event that I need legal representation. And this was all news to me. I had no idea. So over the years, I started noticing very different narratives from members of law enforcement, depending on their demographic group. Women police officers had their own narrative about law enforcement. Officers of color had their own narrative of law enforcement, and white male police officers had their own narrative of law enforcement. They were all very different. And if I'm keeping it a buck, I don't care what skin color you were. If you were a male officer, your take on law enforcement was different from a female's. I've noticed that over the past 8 years. And it's been fascinating. So one of those narratives is, and I shouldn't even call it a narrative, experience. One of those experiences is Black and brown police officers talking about what their lives were like before they became police officers. The only police officers that I have talked to, except for one white male, and we have had over 1,000 members of law enforcement come through Game Changer. Over 1,000. And out of all those cops, one white male cop had similar experience as the Latino and Black cops, particularly here in Los Angeles. And that experience is they were beaten up by the cops, whether it's LAPD or the LA County Sheriff's Department. They were beaten as kids before they became cops, which made me wonder, well, if you've had such a horrible experience, why would you want to become a cop? And almost to a man, they said, because I want to treat community residents better than I was treated. There's a problem inside that profession. Instead of bitching about it, I want to get inside that profession and do what I can to change it. And what most of them, if not all of them, have said that they discovered, the only thing that they can change is how they individually treat people that they interact with. They haven't found it possible to change the entire department, the entire culture of the department. And I find this fascinating. I found it fascinating. I also can share with you that Black and brown police officers talk about being profiled when they were young, before they became cops, but also being profiled now while they are cops in plain clothes. So when they're out of uniform, just being the Black or Latino guy that they are driving around their car, they get pulled over. They get pulled over, and it's BS, and it is racial profiling. Yes, I'm telling you that Black and brown cops who are currently employed in their respective agencies talk about racial profiling being a thing inside of the profession because they have experienced it. I'll give you an example of one Latino cop in San Diego. He was driving his car, and there was a curve in the road. There was a curve in the road. There wasn't an opportunity to make a right or a left. And a cop pulls him over from his own department. And when he gets to the car, he says to the cop that pulled him over, so this is a Latino cop and a white cop that pulled him over, what did you pull me over for? And he said, failure to signal. He said, failure to signal for what? There was no opportunity to make a left or a right turn. There was a curve in the road. And so this cop that pulled him over was adamant that you failed to signal, and he was starting to get an attitude. And luckily for him, he was a cop. He let it be known that he was a cop. He let it be known he was a cop in the same department that this officer that pulled him over worked in, showed him his badge, and asked him, what is this about? What is this BS stop about? And the cop that pulled him over started hemming and hawing and apologized to him. I don't hear stories like that from female officers or from white male officers. I hear stories like that from Latino and Black officers. And that's the difference. They tell about their experiences. Here in Los Angeles, I can't tell you how many cops have talked about being pulled over for BS reasons in Beverly Hills. They all talk about the Beverly Hills Police Department. And I just sit there and listen to it like I'm a student. I'm absorbing all of this. The first game changer event that we had was in December of 2016. The first one ever. We've done 170. The first one ever. This cop was a member of the San Diego Police Department, but before he came to San Diego, he was a cop somewhere in the South. I can't remember what he said. And he was talking about how he was called the N-word while in uniform by white residents. The same people who typically talk about backing the blue. They didn't back him that day. He was not the right skin tone wearing a blue uniform. And for that to be my first game changer experience, to hear a Black cop talk about being called the N-word by people that he has sworn to serve and protect, I wasn't prepared for that right out the gate. But he shared that experience. And I have it on camera. I'll dig it up and I'll post it on our TikTok channel. Our TikTok channel is The Original Game Changer, all one word, The Original Game Changer. So I want to share that for you. And then when it comes to reform, you hear members of law enforcement talking about the need for reform inside of the profession. Well, it's typically Black, brown, and female officers that are calling for reform and saying that there needs to be reform inside of the profession. It's not happening very quickly. And these are reforms that can be done inside of the department. No laws need to be changed, just policies and procedures need to change. There was a police officer I met in Columbus, Ohio, and she told me, for example, here's a policy that probably needs to change, that if you have your body-worn camera turned on outside of police business and you capture on camera a police officer doing or saying something nefarious, the officer that's on camera doing something nefarious or saying something nefarious doesn't get in trouble. You get in trouble for having your body cam on at a time that's not related to official police work. You can't make this up. I didn't believe it, and she assured me that that was the case. I don't know if that's the case now, because she told me this back in 2018, but I was shocked to hear that. And I want to end the stream on this. I feel, based on what I've heard and I've seen over the past 8 years, that if there's any reform effort that's going to take place inside of the profession, that female officers should lead that charge. I say that for a couple of reasons. Female officers generally tend to use their minds and their mouths before ever resorting to any type of use of force, as opposed to men. They're not, generally speaking, as physically imposing as male police officers are. So, like officers say, I'd rather talk you into handcuffs than force you into handcuffs if handcuffs are warranted. Female officers use this and this and this, their mind, their mouths, and their hearts before they grab anything on their tactical utility belt, before they grab that taser, before they grab that gun. They're going to use their minds, their hearts, and their mouths. And this is evidenced by feedback that we've received from juvenile probationers, juveniles that have been on probation, are on probation, and have been arrested and have spent time in juvenile hall. They have told us that they prefer to be arrested by female officers. And I wondered why. And I have posed this question to other officers over the years after discovering this, and I've quizzed them. I've said, why do you think that the kids would rather be arrested by female officers? And the officers will say, oh, they're more motherly, or they're more gentle, they're more understanding. And none of those answers were what the juveniles said. They said they preferred to be arrested by female officers because female officers will listen to them and hear them out. They will let them express themselves as they're being put into handcuffs in the back of a squad car and then taken downtown for booking. It makes all the difference in the world to them what their arrest experience is like, rather than to be told, shut the F up and thrown into the back of a squad car. Female officers will listen as they're putting you in handcuffs, hear you out, have a conversation with you, perhaps while they're driving you downtown to be booked. And that's a better experience than being manhandled and ignored. People want to be heard. And I say all of this, I share all of this with you because I'm waiting for a revolution inside of law enforcement. So many officers talk to us about what needs to change, but I don't see them collectively coming together to demand the change. Does everybody remember right after George Floyd was murdered? Yes, he was murdered. I'm going to put that out there. And we can have a conversation about George Floyd. We can do that some other day. But after George Floyd was murdered, you had NBA players sitting out basketball games in protest. Like they were going on strike, so to speak. Now, when's the last time you've ever seen people from a whole different profession boycotting on behalf of another profession? Why aren't police officers boycotting inside their own profession? I asked that question. I meet a lot of good cops. And yet they haven't done that. So you got LeBron James and guys who dribble a ball for a living boycotting police treatment of citizens. If members of law enforcement feel so strongly about the need for reform, why aren't you boycotting? Where are the freedom riders inside of your own profession? Where's the Martin Luther King inside of law enforcement? Where are the collective groups of freedom riders inside of law enforcement that are coming together and demanding change? I don't see them. And you don't either. We see lone wolves, and this is generally kept quiet. This doesn't really make the news. But typically anybody who goes against their department, it doesn't tend to end well for them on an individual level. And when other officers see that, they're like, you know what? I need this paycheck. I need these benefits. I'm going to keep my head down. I'm going to treat people as well as I can. I'm not going to be a sacrificial lamb. But they say there's safety in numbers. And for 8 years, I keep hearing there are way more good officers than there are bad officers. Can't tell you how many times I've heard cops say, no one hates a bad cop more than a good cop. I believe you. But what are you doing to get rid of the bad cops? I'm asking the question. So these are things that I wanted to talk to you about based on El Amin's video. I don't know how you feel about it, but please comment. I'll ask you again to hit that notification bell, subscribe to our platforms. We'd love to hear what you have to say about this particular live stream. And like I said, I'm going to be chopping this up, making clips of it. I hope you enjoyed this impromptu session of Cops and Convicts, this Sunday night live stream with yours truly, Sean Shepard. I'll get at you next time. Oh, before I go, I'm going to be interviewing 2 former inmates. One's name is Anthony Logan. The other's name is Vance Harris. That will be at 6 p.m. this Tuesday, 6 p.m. Pacific time on the Cops and Convicts YouTube channel. We're going to be live streaming that interview. And then on Wednesday at 6 p.m., I'll be interviewing Vance Harris. So enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening. I hope your football team won tonight because mine sure didn't. The Jets are garbage. They're hot garbage. But you know what? The Cops and Convicts podcast is not. All right, y'all. I'll get with you. Take care.